Okay, let's talk about this. I want to talk about tactically for just a few minutes. You know, a lot of things has happened in the world lately, and especially with this attempted assassination and all this craziness, a lot of things happen where you ask yourself, when you start examining things, you know, we can examine the Secret Service and say they failed at this, they failed at that. And you can examine your local police and say, well, they don't do a job, they don't do this kind of job or that kind of job. And we can examine everyone else. But honestly, how many of us examine ourself tactically? So I started thinking about this a lot, and I do this a lot. I try to be a self critic and self examiner and ask myself, where am I failing tactically? So the first thing that you need to examine, like, what are your threats in life? What are your threats? I mean, if you're the president, you got a lot of threats. There's a lot of people, you know, don't like you or whatever. You're a congressman, same thing. But as just an everyday Joe, what are your threats in life? Does your neighbor hate you? Do you have an ex-wife, an ex-husband? Do you have a business partner that you won't sell out to? I mean, what is your real threats? And if you don't have any of that in your local area, when you go to the grocery store, is it safe in the parking lot? Is the local Walmart safe? Do you live in the hood? I mean, what are your real threats? On a scale from 1 to 10, what would you say is number 10 that can hurt you the most in your local area? And then the second part of that is, what are your hazards? What are your hazards for where you live? I mean, if you live in Florida, like here in Florida, a good hazard here would be hurricanes. We have a lot of crime locally, so you could end up getting into a problem at the local store. And we got a lot of people drinking and doing drugs and acting stupid, so those are hazards. There's tornadoes here a lot. That's a weather hazard. There's lightning. Several people's been killed by lightning in this local area, so that's a hazard. Another big hazard is automobiles. I mean, there's probably more people killed by automobiles than anything I know. Another hazard is the food you're eating. That's a hazard. If you're eating a lot of saturated oils, canola oil, vegetable oil, and you're frying in that every night, then it's probably not good for your blood vessels. So think about your hazards and how you can mitigate the threat and mitigate the hazard. A good way to mitigate the hazard to some things is just don't go out like during a lightning storm. Stay indoors. You know, don't go out and be at a ball field during a lightning storm. If you see there's a storm coming up, go indoors. The other thing is don't go to the supermarket at the bad hours or the rush hours. Go at the hours where there's not many people there. Don't go out driving after midnight, you know, and because especially on a holiday or something like that where people are prone to be drinking and driving. There's a lot of ways to mitigate your hazards. I want you to think about your vulnerabilities. How are you vulnerable to those hazards? With me, I've been in and out of a wheelchair a lot. So I'm vulnerable as a person that I couldn't actually stand there and fight, you know, toe to toe with someone. I'm going to have to rely on a weapon system to be the great equalizer. Or someone's going to beat me to death, you know, if they decided to or something like that. So that's a vulnerability. So that's one of my vulnerabilities. What's your other vulnerability? Where you live could be a vulnerability. If you're living in a bad neighborhood, that could be a negative, you know. And if you're living in the middle of the country by yourself, that could be a vulnerability. Not having the proper security system, not having gates, not having all the different security things that you may need to keep you safe at home or to give you warning at home, not necessarily to keep you safe, that could be a vulnerability of your own. Your health could be a vulnerability. Your eyesight, just a lot of things. So know what yours are and know how to mitigate the risk. Your reaction time. What is your reaction time to a threat? You know, if someone pulls up to your house in the middle of the night, how fast can you get a hold of a weapon system and keep your family safe? If someone pulls out a gun at the grocery store and shoots one of the attendants and turns around and is about to shoot you, how fast can you draw and shoot? Or how fast can you get your ass out of there? You know, how fast can you do things? What is your reaction time? If someone is in your house and they cut their hand really bad and they got mass bleeding, how fast can you stop that bleeding? You know, how fast can you do CPR? How fast can you do the Heimlich maneuver? These are all, how fast can you put out a fire? These are all things that you need to ask yourself. What is your reaction time? The next thing is your defense deployment rate. How fast, and we kind of just said that before, how fast is your deployment rate? And then right behind that is, what is your depletion rate? Now, what does that mean? What is your defense depletion rate? If you are having an issue and you go out in the yard and people are shooting at you and you have to return fire, and you only took one magazine, then your depletion rate is one magazine. Ever how fast you're shooting at. If you are run upon an accident on the road and there's a lot of people hurt and there's a lot of mass bleeding and you only have one tourniquet, then you're depleted pretty quick. If you run up on a fire somewhere and you only have one fire extinguisher, then your depletion rate is one fire extinguisher. You get what I'm saying? So basically, how deep are your preps for an emergency? How prepared are you? Are you just prepared for the superficial, the one-time thing, and it's over, you know, and then you got to go back to the store to get some more supplies or whatever? Are you prepared to go deeper? Can you handle 2 or 3 fire extinguishers? Do you have a multitude of bandages? Do you carry more than one tourniquet? You know, do you have more than one magazine in case something was to go bad at your location and you have to actually fight your way out? That's the depletion rate. So anyway, ask yourself these questions, kind of question yourself, Monday morning quarterback yourself, and say, you know, how prepared am I for a tactical emergency? I mean, am I ready? And how deep am I ready? Okay? All right. Go out and make yourself, your family, and your fellow warrior better.